All right, all right, all right. I'm doing my best, Matthew McConaughey, in a Scottish accent, which is kind of weird. Happy Thursday, Thursday the 9th, Wednesday. Why am I saying Thursday? Ahead of myself already. Happy Wednesday, the 19th of April. You can see myself, Danny. I'm head of podcaster sport and experience at Captivate, and I got my good friend and colleague Gary Aylott, who's our head of design. How are you doing, Gary?
I'm very well, thank you, buddy. Very well.
Awesome.
Good intro.
Awesome.
How are
Looking
you?
forward to this. I'm
Yeah,
good. I watched The Mandalorian season finale this morning before my workday started.
of
So
course.
that got me well set up for the day ahead.
You got to do it,
Um,
haven't you? Especially the finale. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. It's been a mixed series this year. I find that this season's been up and down a wee bit. I
Mhm.
know you and Mark's been speaking about that on your podcast, Barker Rebellion. But yeah, it was like a nice way to close the season out.
Mm. Yes. Yeah.
But I'm excited for this. This is going to be very cool. We'll let some people join in, and we'll look for the usual faces that are going to jump into chat, and obviously the usual housekeeping rules, which we'll go over soon. But I'm excited for this. It's like a new series that we're doing that's going to have the whole Captivate team involved in. Really looking at some of the cool features that we've been releasing and how to use them. The features that we've released lately. But how are you feeling about this, Gary? I know you're going to be leading this one today, mate.
Indeedy. Yes, this is a very cool idea. So we get this. I think what drove the idea to do this initially was we get so many comments via conversation at various conventions and meetups and whatnot, where we're talking about features and the things that you can do through the various workflow routes. And a lot of times the reaction is, "Oh my God, I didn't realize you could do that." So as we started to talk through that more, it was, we should let people know the cool stuff that you can do by using a specific tool within Captivate or a combination of those things. And this is the first one, actually. Yeah. So the first one is going to be talking about the dynamic show notes builder tool and using it in conjunction with another one to create some magic, so you don't have to spend lots of time, and in some cases any time, working up your show notes. So it's going to be good. I'm excited about this first one.
And I like that no time little statement there. That's like that's a podcaster's gold right there. Well, I don't have to spend any time on that, but I can still polish my episode. Awesome. So what we'll do, and I know Mark actually speaking to someone on Twitter yesterday because she didn't realize that Captivated guest booking, for example, and that was one of the features we released probably in the last 12 months. And a whole conversation started on Twitter about, oh, well, we do this and we do that and we do this and etc. So I'm just going to do some check-ins. Who's here today? Shout out in the comments where you're from. I can see we've got some familiar faces there. So Mike, how are you doing, Mike? Good to see Mike Flake. Coffee in hand for CG sermons. I've got my tea in hand, got my chamomile tea. I had some lemon and ginger tea earlier, and that was a bit spicy actually. So I'm just going to stick with the chamomile today. We got James. James is popping in. Great episode, lots of action. We'll try and deliver that. Gary's like he might be a smooth talker with his dulcet tones, but he's a man of action, as you can tell by his bearded demeanour. So Gary will be bringing the action for sure there, I think.
I think James might be referring to Mando.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. I thought he was on about this episode.
But this episode will be good.
Oh, well,
full of action.
Thanks, James.
Yeah.
We're going to just take that as this episode, even though it's not really started yet. But yeah. Christian's there from St. Louis, Missouri. Is that Missouri? No, it's not Missouri. What's MO? I can never remember the states in US. I apologize, Christian. Please correct me what MO is. Is it Missouri? It might be, actually. We've got Adrian McIntyre here, as usual. James is in from Philly. Speaker tips is John in London. Someone's saying my volume is low. Let me correct that. How's this sounding? Is that better, Tamara? I
can hear you. I can hear you fine.
Yeah, sometimes on the front end it can be a little bit different.
Sometimes.
So I'm just going to check, make sure my little settings aren't being messed up. But yeah, Tamara, if you can let me know if that's made it better for my volume, and let me know. And if anybody else, if that's too loud now, just let me know. We got Bob. Oh yeah, Bob Williams. Here we go. Adrian sound good. So hopefully we're all good with that now. It may have been StreamYard doesn't always balance the volume out, so we have to do that manually. So thanks for the heads up. Let us know if one of us is too loud or too quiet. But it's different on speaker than headphones. Yeah, you can get that sometimes based on the output of your speaker versus what your headphone output is as well. So that can make a difference, Tamara. And we also got Chris, another Canadian here. Awesome. We got Chris in from Gowenstown, Ontario. I'm in Ontario, Chris. So good to meet a fellow Ontarian.
Got
We
Pascal
got
as well.
Aubrey.
I know that Pascal definitely would have watched Mando.
Yeah, Pascal, just saw him come in there from Nons. I always like to see Pascal, and he brings that little bit of, exquisiteness from Nons in France there. We got two girls homesteading from rural Minnesota. So we got a lot of good people in today, a lot of different places there. Dr. Trent and Marianne Trent. Hi, good to see you, Marianne. Good to see you. So yeah, what we'll do, we're looking at 5 minutes now. So we'll give a couple of more minutes for anybody else to jump in, and we'll go through some housekeeping. And then I'll be handing over to Gary to take over and lead this one. Gary uses a feature he's going to be talking about really well in their show, his and Mark's show, and other podcasts. So I'm looking forward to him sharing that with you. But again, we'll just see who's in here. And it looks like the sound's sorted now. So hopefully that's good. Gary's got the proximity effect going on, so you might perceive him as louder. There we go. Yeah, Gary's getting really nice, good, proper mic technique there from Gary. So we got North Carolina in here. We've also got Tamara's in Toronto. Hi, Tamara. I'm up in Port Sydney, up in Muskoka. So I'm about 2.5 hours north of you over in Toronto. We got New Hampshire, which is awesome. And yes, Gary is fancy. So we know that.
I had a beer at the airport a few months ago that was called Muskoka.
All right. So yeah, Muskoka. Yep. Sorry, I was correcting you. That's really rude of me, Gary. I apologise for that.
It was nice.
Yeah. So that's probably the local brewery. They've got one up here, Muskoka Brewing Company or Muskoka Brewery. They've got about 10 or 12 really good beers that get spread across Ontario and some of Canada.
Nice.
We've got David in from. Hi, David. How you doing, bud? He's in from Boston and Denver, Colorado. Denver, Colorado. Are you going to be at Podcast Movement in August at all? Because there's some of the Captivate teams going to be there. So if you are there, come say hi. We'll be hanging out there and mixing and stuff, etc. So yeah, that's in August. And if you're going to be Podcast Movement then, come say hi. We'd love to see you. Alrighty. So what I'll do, I'll just go through some little housekeeping for anybody that is new today. Basically, Gary will be going over the feature and the secret hack that we're going to be using and showing you today. If you have a question, we will be having a live Q&A at the end. So if there's a question, why would you use it? How would you set it up? Best features, best practices, any kind of thing to do with what Gary's going to go over today, just drop it in the comments with question at the front. And I'll also be putting up a little ticker tape as well that shows that now and again, how to ask a question. And we'll pick them up after this, live session, which we're probably looking about between 20, 30 minutes or so, Gary, I think, right?
Yeah, no longer than that.
Okay, so I think we're good to go. So, Gary, I'm going to hand over to you. And just actually briefly, before you do that, just to go over what you mentioned earlier about the amount of releases we've done, I'm just going to show quickly my screen. And I'm going to look at this one right here. And this is exactly the features that we've been released over the last 12 months. So you can see there's quite a lot. The last one was in March, but we've got a big one coming out very soon. That's going to be very cool for us to share. But we had RSS feed enhancements by Podcasting 2.0 features. We've improved how we use Amy in the pre and post bulk row bulk editor. We've had team member search improvements, episode planning feature, which Gary's going to talk about, playlists, guest booking, there's bug fixes, more privacy for our users by hiding the email address from the RSS feed, and analytics improvements, all sorts of good stuff. So I know that we're going to be looking at that today with you, Gary. So I'm going to be quiet now and hand over to your good self, and I will see you later.
Thank you very much, Danny. He's good at the old intros, isn't he, Danny? Very good. Thank you, buddy. As Danny mentioned, if you've got any questions, just fire those over in the comments, and we will get to those at the end. We'll do a Q&A and go through that stuff. We've got some questions coming in already, so we will get to those. It's all good. So a bit of backstory then for dynamic show notes, because the reason why we want to pick this as a first one is because as we go through these series, we're going to be doing these monthly, I believe. As we go through this series of videos where we take you through some of the more in-depth or hidden quote-unquote features within Captivate, hopefully it will build up a really cool, efficient workflow for you. So by all means, as we go through each month and each video, incorporate these things into your workflow, etc. But the basis for this one was to get you off to a really good footing with something that you have to do every single time with your podcast episodes. So this is not something that you might use. So as an example, if your episode or your podcast isn't interview based, or it's not, doesn't have that particular feature, you might not use guest booking all the time, or that kind of thing. So with show notes, it's something that you have to do every single time, every episode, for the most part. If you're not doing show notes, then you should be, of course. But it's also a real solid way of just getting the relevant info as a snapshot for your episode. So as people are browsing through various podcast apps and networks, when they read through what that episode entails, etc., then that gets you off to a good footing immediately. And also, it's a good way of throwing some links in there and getting some SEO sorted as well, and that kind of thing. So with Show Notes Builder, it's the kind of thing that you want to be to nailing in every episode. On the reverse side of that, on the other side of the coin, so to speak, it's really laborious sometimes having to do show notes, especially if you've got a whole chunk of info that you need to get down in every episode. If you're mentioning various sources throughout the internet, if you're mentioning various people, if you're talking about that stuff, then it can be a real slog. So I'm going to take you through just very quickly the basics of how our dynamic tool actually works, and then show you this very cool workflow that you can use in conjunction with another one of our tools that will really help just minimize all of your time when it comes to actually publishing your episode. So I'm going to share my screen, and I will take you through that stuff. So you should be able to see my screen in 1 second. There we go. If those of you that can't see my screen, just let me know. So I'm going to be using our one of my podcasts that I run, as Danny said, with a friend of mine. You might know his name. He's been around here a little bit on the Captivate YouTube channel. It's Mark. This is just a geeky, sort of silly podcast that we do on a weekly basis that we just geek out about Star Wars and stuff. It's light and fluffy, not too deep in anything, but it's a good way of us really testing out and making use of all the cool Captivate features and stuff that we work on. Now, Show Notes Manager is comprised of three things, essentially. The first part of it is templates. And if we think about templates as a good analogy for Show Notes, that the Show Notes Builder tool is, if you think about it as a document. So a template is the container. It's the bit of paper, if you like, that contains all of the things. And those things could be a combination of static text. It could be blocks. It could be shortcodes. It could be anything. But a template is where you house all of the content that's going to go in there. Blocks are, again, if we go back to the document analogy, blocks are kind of like paragraphs or multiple paragraphs or just chunks, buckets of information that populate your template or your document. And then the third thing, which are shortcodes, and they come in two flavors. So shortcodes are obviously it's all dynamic, but we offer a list of shortcodes that you can use just straight off the bat, and there's a list of those. I'll show those in a second, and they pull in various bits of information from other parts of your podcast throughout the dashboard. And then the other flavor is the custom shortcodes, and this is where you can create completely custom little bits of dynamic pieces of reusable content that you can put throughout your blocks or directly into your templates. And if you want to have a look at the list of shortcodes that we offer just as default, if you head over to our help center, which is help.captivate.fm, and just go over to Dynamic Show Notes Builder, and then look in Understanding Dynamic Show Notes Builder Shortcodes and Custom Shortcodes, and scroll down, you will see a list of all of the shortcodes that you can use immediately outside of the custom ones. And these are divided into bringing stuff into from a podcast level, from an episode level, using guest information, your attribution links, or your single promo link, etc. Now, going back to our example here, before I dive into the workflow itself, this is the end goal. This is what we want to achieve. So if I show you the Captivate website for Spark of Rebellion. And this is a free website. If you're not using this, this is one of our awesome tools that is completely free. You can spin this up in a few seconds. It generates a very cool website for your podcast and all of your episodes and info, etc. This is one of our episodes here. And you can see that this is my show notes. So this is the player that gets embedded. And everything that you see from here down to here, this is all of our show notes information. All of that stuff is just generated by these 3 bits of dynamic content. So every time I go in to publish a new episode, I don't need to start fiddling with my sign-off information. I don't need to start copy and pasting research links that I've used. I don't need to start retyping out everything. So depending on how you want to use dynamic show notes, you can use it at a very basic level. You can just create a template, very basic, and you can rock and roll with that each week. But if you want to have a really optimized, efficient workflow, then using dynamic shortcodes and blocks in this fashion will really cut down on your production time. And in a nutshell, that's really, just to hammer the point home, that's really what Captivate and what we really want to enable the sort of the indie podcaster to be able to free up as much time as possible, so that you can focus that freed up time on creating additional content or marketing your podcast or talking to people about sponsorships and partnerships, etc. And you can only do that with so many hours in a day or a week. So if we can save you time with this stuff, then you're off to the races essentially. Now, with the templates themselves, I'm going to take you through. This is a real life example, by the way. We use this every single week. So if we start at the top level, the template itself, you can see we've set that as a default. And what that enables you to do is, if I go in to publish a new episode, because I have that set as a default, if I come down to my episode show notes, you can see that it's already loaded that content in. So I don't need to do anything. I mean, I can if I want to. I can remove these bits of dynamic content. I can add to it. But essentially, that content is already loaded in and I'm good to go. And the template itself, as I said, is set by default, and it's comprised of some dynamic content via a shortcode, which is being pulled in from the other tool, which I'm going to mention in a second, and it's using one of our blocks. So if I go back into blocks, you can see I've got one here called weekly sign off. And if I go into that, remember I said that blocks are like multiple chunks of information that comprise a template. This is what our weekly sign off block looks like. And you can see this is a combination of static text and also shortcodes. So you can see here that our podcast title is dynamic, along with one of our attribution links that sends you off to our Patreon account, as well as Instagram and various social media. So all of those things are sitting in this block nicely. So if we make a change to those shortcodes later on, everything gets populated into this block. So from the next episode onwards, all of that new information is there, and we don't have to go through every single piece of content and do that. So it scales really nicely from shortcodes, which are those little tiny reusable bits that are completely dynamic, right the way through to blocks and templates. So the block here for weekly sign off is what is creating all this this text here within this block in the template. Now, the other part of the template is research links and episode idea details. So now I'm going to jump into the other part of the tool. And this is where probably the biggest shift in terms of your workflow might occur when you're using this method. Before we launched the dynamic show notes builder tool, it was very much, like I said earlier, quite a laborious thing where you'd have to go into publish your episode, and then you'd have to have that stuff saved somewhere in a document or a text file, copy and paste it, bring it in, make edits, all that stuff. And with the show notes and episode planning, that was also the other piece of the puzzle that made everything so much more efficient. Because if we try and get out of the mindset of creating episodes on the fly and doing show notes on the fly, if you go back a step and use our research and planning tool, For a number of reasons, that's really beneficial, most of all for your time and your workflow efficiency. Now, for years and years, when I used to publish episodes before these features, it was always a case of thinking about content, thinking about ideas, thinking about things that I wanted to talk about on my podcast, but writing it down in a notepad that I would 9 times out of 10 leave in another room and wouldn't have with me when I'm recording. And also just ideas floating around my head, which sounds amazing at the time. And then I'd make a cup of tea, go and do something, and they would be gone. So I'm going to flick over very quickly to our episode planning and research links, because this is the first part of the process. With our episode planning and research links, it's exactly as you think it works. It's essentially getting all of your ideas down within the platform. And the beauty of doing this is you can either use it as a bit of a blue sky area where you're just creating very top level ideas, and you can just get all your ideas down, or you can actually map out your upcoming episodes with all of their content. So for this example, I'm going to show you a workflow for one of our typical episodes, and I've created an episode idea for that already. So we do a weekly schedule, and every week we cover news and reviews, everything about Star Wars. So you can see here that I've created an episode called Latest Episode for SOR, and its status is idea. And you can see here, if I go into this, the episode title is just, the idea title is just for me personally. That's not going to get carried over to the published episode. Production notes, which I'll come into in a second, but the episode details, this is where I'm starting to compose my show notes already. So the benefit of doing this now is that your show notes are relevant to the subject and the topic and the research links that you're including. It's already in your head at this time. So when you're creating your episode and you've put your production notes in, you're already in the zone, so to speak. You already know what this podcast is about, etc. So I've dropped in some details here, and these are the things that are going to get carried over when we convert this idea into an episode that will then populate our show notes. So this production notes section here, by the way, this is a fairly recent update that we did where when you're putting your ideas together, the production notes are completely private. So everything that you put in here is just for you to reference while you're recording. This is completely private. It won't carry over to your final episode. The episode details, and we also mention that here in this helper text, using the shortcode of episode idea details, you can use that shortcode in your templates and blocks, and then you can bring that information over. So I've dropped some text in here, all good. So this episode idea is now ready to go. And I don't need to do anything else with that. My show notes are done. I know what I'm going to reference when I'm recording, all good. When I now go to publish this episode, and I can do this in 2 ways. I can convert this straight from here into an episode, or I can use the shortcode on the fly if I want to, but that's not the point of this. So if I go into this idea and I go to convert this now to an episode, you can see that everything is brought over for me in that template that I showed you a second ago. Now, the shortcodes that create all of this stuff are already set up. I don't need to do anything now on the episode on the fly. So the episode idea details, that's the stuff. If I just cancel this a second, that's the stuff that you would have seen in here. So the show notes I already did when I was creating this idea. I don't need to go and do it. Of course, I can tweak it if I want to. I can change it. I can delete that and do that stuff. But the work has already been done up front. So the important thing also to note with this workflow is that at some point you are going to have to compose show notes. So there is no magic thing where you don't have to do anything whatsoever. Now, you might have seen out in the wild some tools that use AI to magically create your show notes from either transcripts or anything like that. Those things are really early days, and they're a little bit temperamental and buggy. They don't really do, you can only rely on that to a certain amount. And also, like anything that you might have seen in the wild, like ChatGPT, those kind of tools, they will get you to a first base, if you like. They will give you a draft, but then inevitably you're going to have to go in and make edits to that anyway. You're going to have to go in and change things. If you have a good mix of keeping your show notes fairly concise anyway, then really, until those tools become very, very magic, you're going to have to compose your show notes at some point anyway. Now, like I mentioned earlier, it's probably best to do this at this point because you're already thinking about the episode. So that's the whole point of doing your show notes. Do you wait until you publish your episode and do it on the fly? And then you have to sort of think back, like, what did I talk about when we recorded like 4 days ago? What was those things we spoke about? What was the subject? If you've got it now, then you're ready to rock and roll. And also it links into the main benefit of populating your show notes. So if I convert that to an episode idea, the template that I showed you earlier with those 3 shortcodes, the episode idea details as those show notes, the research links is the next bit. So the research links are anything that you've added as a reference point to a website that you want to include in your show notes. And you can see here I've got a bunch of them already saved. And these are super helpful if you want to give your listener a direct link to what you're actually talking about in your podcast, which is so powerful, because how many times have you listened to a podcast where you've mentioned something, or you've even instructed the listener, you've said, by the way, if you want to know more, go to, and chances are you're going to breeze through that. The listener, it might be driving in their car. They haven't got time or anything to write that stuff down. The best they can do is try and remember it and Google it later. With research links, you give them a direct tool. So when they go into your show notes, either during the episode or once they've listened to it, after they go back into it, they can tap that or click that and they can go and see exactly what you've been talking about. Anyway, I digress. That's one of the cool things about research links. But with the research links, we add them every week to our podcast. As you can see here, we have a little title, and that then populates in a really nicely formatted list all of the things that we mention as research links and all the subjects on that particular episode. And again, that's brought in with one shortcode. So all of those things that we've added to the episode, or to the idea, should I say, and you can add these really easily to the idea. So if I want to add a bunch of these, if I go through and check a few, we then get this selector that appears, and I can add that straight to my ideas, or even go back into episodes and add them there. But this is the idea that I created and I showed you a second ago. I can check that, add to the idea, and then when I go into that idea, you'll be able to see down in the research links section, those links are there. So going back to our template in our show notes, that's where that shortcode comes in. So research links, that populates them all in a nice list for us. And then lastly, the weekly sign off, that's a block which contains static text and all of our shortcodes. And that's what creates all of that stuff there. So in a nutshell, that's the workflow for creating show notes. So let's recap just so it's really clear, because it's not just about using the show notes builder tool without using some other tools to help that. So the first thing is the shifting the mindset a little bit from creating your episode, as in recording it and getting all that stuff down, and then at some point in the future, jumping in to publish a new episode, and then you have to rack your brains to think about the stuff, unless you made notes at the time, to think about what you spoke about and the little nuances and the things that you want to direct people to, shifting that mindset to using the planning tool. So even if you're on a schedule and you've got your workflow pretty much down anyway, you can start to use the episode planning tool to start to get your episodes in advance. And the beauty of doing it in the planning section is that you're free to make loads of changes, do anything, or just leave it completely, and just, have that as the entry point to your workflow. And the other part of it is converting those ideas into episodes. Once you've got that mindset kind of shifted a little bit and you're doing more of the planning, that then creates the time that's freed up later on when you come to publish. Because I remember when we first launched this feature, it was such an amazing feeling to have a bunch of work done up front initially with the planning tool, and then it was just literally a few clicks and our episode was done and out the door. It was so cool. So just shift that mindset a little bit to do the planning bit up front and get your show notes down. And just remember, you can always go in and tweak your show notes afterwards. They're not, set in stone that you can't do anything with it. But if you get into the habit of doing that, it frees up loads more time when you come to actually publish. Because the publish your episode screen, bear in mind, you have to do a few things on here. You don't have to utilize all of it, but you do have to go through, upload your audio, your title, any additional summaries, your types, add guest booking. Do you want to do specific episode artwork, your SEO information? Are you drop feeding to other episodes within your network? All that stuff. Once you've used Captivate for a little while, you whiz through this by second nature anyway, but you still want to minimize the amount of time that you're spending on that page. So the mindset shifts a little bit. And then secondly, using that information that you've populated within the planning tool to just very easily use dynamic content to populate your show notes. And you can do that however you want. The way that we've done it is what works for us. But on your podcast, you can use this however you want. If you don't want to create all of them, if you want to just use a template, and it's a fairly basic chunk of show notes that you're using, if you just want to use a template and a few shortcodes here and there, it's completely fine. You don't have to dive into every single thing and use template blocks and shortcodes. It's helpful to do that in terms of keeping your content manageable and organized. Just try and think about, when you're using anything that's dynamic in terms of blocks and shortcodes, try and think of that as, is there the likelihood that I'm going to need to update this content at some point in the future? If the answer is yes, then you want to use a block or a shortcode, because that's the beauty of using that dynamic content. But you could just use a bunch of static text in a template, and at the very end, just use a shortcode to spit out your short links, or to spit out your research links, or to your single promo link, anything like that. But it's just really moving it to the beginning part of your workflow. So that's I think that's all. I think I've covered everything there. I'm going to bring Danny back on so we can go through some questions or anything that you wanted to ask about that. Hopefully I've showed that fairly well. But yeah, let's bring Danny back on and we will go through any questions that you might have. Hello, Danny.
Hello. So I'm going to, that was awesome, Gary. That was, I was sat here thinking, this is how I should be doing a lot of my stuff, and I'm bad at that. So I'm going to be rewatching this video time and again, and then pinging you in the Team Slack channel about, Gary, how do you do this trick on your show? So that was awesome. And it's like you say, I think what's really key as well, is you mentioned it a few times, is these are dynamic show notes and dynamic research links, etc. So you can go through your back catalog and update old episodes with new details and new links out to websites that have got an update on a plot twist or something like that, or something that happened in season 1 of, say, Star Wars Mandalorian that now makes sense in season 3, for example. And it's a great way to really update and keep all your episodes as up to date as possible without having to go through each individual episode and updating them one at a time, which is so laborious. So I think that's really a cool feature with all these, dynamic show notes and blocks, etc.
Yes, yeah, and it's something that we were all mega excited about as well internally when we were building this and doing it, because you'll notice that since Captivate started, all the features that even the stuff that's on the roadmap, it's all stuff that we all use as a team with our own shows and internal shows and everything. It's all stuff that we absolutely use. We never just put features out for the sake of it. It's all stuff that we actively use as a team, as podcasters. So we were mega excited for this one. Yeah, it was cool.
Definitely. I'm just going to share some comments that came in before we got the questions. We did get some questions that came in. So I'll leave your screen up there with the show notes manager just in case, or the dashboard, I should say, just in case we need to jump in and have a look at something specifically. But we've got Summit City Studios, who mentioned the show note templates, blocks, and dynamic shortcodes have been super helpful.
Cool.
Which is always great to hear when we have the features. Bob's really happy with this. You've got your first Patreon there, I think, from Bob. Once you do like a private podcast on this one, but it's so grateful you're doing this. I've only been using a fraction of the capabilities in Captivate, and I think that's one of the things that we do hear from our podcasters, Bob. And one of the reasons that we're doing this, live webinar series that will deep dive into these hacks. Pascal, definitely. Pascal's mentioned that he sees himself using the research links feature a lot more. And as Gary says, Pascal, it definitely adds more context and makes your episode notes, your show notes more authoritative and helps you stand out from, say, similar podcasts in your niche or topics because you've put the extra work and you're giving all the details that you've got to your listeners and making them feel more, valued, which is what you want your listeners to feel when listening to your podcast, for sure. And then we've also got Adrian makes a great point here. It's a very flexible set of tools that can work well for planning and prepping future episodes and post-hoc reconstruction of episode notes for seat of the pants conversations. And that's a great, as Gary was showing you, that's a great example, Adrian, for going back in and doing stuff on the fly and just making changes. So awesome to see. So we did get some questions in, and I'm just making sure, is there any more? I'm going to add a couple of stars there. So we've got some questions that are to do with this feature, and then one that came in, I think, that's possibly not, but we can cover it in this webinar, I think.
Cool.
So James has got a great question here, Gary. I know that you brought up bulk show notes. My question is, if you want to update the bulk show notes, will it go back and update already published episodes or only new ones?
Will it update already published episodes or only new ones? Danny, you'll have to answer this one. Just while I go and look that up.
Yeah, so if it's dynamic, if you've set up as dynamic and you edit the dynamic block or the dynamic shortcode, that will update anywhere that block or shortcode is added. As long as you set it up as dynamic when you're creating, first of all, you have two choices, and there's like a little toggle or a little checkbox or radio box, if I recall. So you got dynamic and static. And static's good for something that's always going to be there in every episode, no matter what. Whereas dynamic, as Gary was showing, you can update that, and that will update the details on the fly for you.
Yeah, let me just show you that screen, actually. So if I go in to add a shortcode, and I want to add, the podcast author, this is the window that Danny was mentioning. So to add this shortcode, it's default to dynamic, which is the one you want most of the time. And if I select dynamic, that will be changed across every single episode once I've made that change, or even with custom, shortcodes. If I add a custom one, this hiatus message, if I put dynamic, if I then go and change that, so if I go to my show notes, just discard that for now, and go into my custom shortcodes and my hiatus message, if I change this text at some point, anywhere that I've used that shortcode throughout my episodes, it will update that for me. I think unless you're referring to show notes that have been published out into the wild, I don't think they will update, Danny, or I could be wrong on that.
It was in the RSS feed. I believe it should be. I'd have to double check, but
okay, cool.
It should do, because it's updating your feed with the show notes.
Of course,
it should update it, actually. Yeah, it should.
Yeah. Yes.
But yeah, great question, James. Tamara's got a question. I think this is more for you, Gary. This is a good one for you to answer. This isn't related to this, but we can answer this because I know she was asking at the start of the episode. How do we ensure our sound is great despite how our audience is listening, i.e. system speakers, phone speakers, or headphones on their side? Okay.
Our sound is great despite how our audience is listening. So that's really just some best practices, I guess, Tamara, with first of all, this is a bit of a subject for another we have an office hours for this sort of thing. But very quickly, in two parts, the first one is make sure that your source is as good as it can be to begin with. So make sure that your equipment is set up as it should be, your levels all correct, and the second thing is when you're mastering or editing your episode, make sure that you've got the correct loudness meter for that. So the industry standard for this stuff is usually -16 LUFS, etc. And just make sure that the best practices are in place for your levels and your mastering, and that will at least give you a good footing. And if anyone complains about your audio, then just first of all just ask them how they're listening. If they're listening to if they're in the bath and they're listening to an Alexa that's a floor above them, then that's something to have a conversation with them about. But if you're getting constant sort of feedback about the audio, then then it's something to look into. Yeah.
Speaking from experience there, Gary, being in the bath listening to Alexa.
Maybe. Maybe.
David, I'm just going to answer your question quickly. We won't be covering the chapter markers, because Captivate doesn't currently support chapters, but look out for that coming up in an upcoming feature release, as more features to support podcasting 2.0 will be released soon. Okay, mate? Just make sure I wanted to answer that for you. We've also got, are the templates only coded for Captivate? It is a Captivate feature, so it's only for Captivate podcasting users, but you can use it. It populates your RSS feed. It populates your show notes on your Captivate site. So it is Captivate only. So if you're not, we've got an offer at the end if you're not a Captivate user. I'll pop that up at the end of this webinar. We've got an offer for you if you want to check Captivate out. Let's have a look. Here's a great question. Can you assign, from Tracking Wisdom, can you assign multiple episodes to one research link? Or I'm guessing one link to multiple episodes, maybe?
Yes, you certainly can. Yeah, if I hop back over to my research links. So if I just have one link that you're referring to, I'll take this top one here. This selector that pops up that says add selected to ideas or episodes. This gives me a checkbox and I can select as many episodes as I like. So I can go through and do all of these and ideas as well. And that one research link will be added to any of these episodes that I've selected. And then I just click add to those selected episodes or ideas. And it will add it to all of those. Multiple, yeah, certainly.
Awesome. And that was that one. We've also got, this is a great idea. Well, actually, I'm going to show this from David. This is a great idea that we'll take away for the team, David. It'd be cool in a future update if the show notes showed what's in these shortcodes. Maybe show the actual text and content, but with a highlighted background to show it's a block. So I'm sure yourself and Pierre and Kieran, etc., mate, could look at that as a possible little helper box or something, as a possible future update.
Yes, so I think just to confirm, David, I think let me hop back into here. So if I show you, I think what you mean. So at the moment, if I was to go into this template and I can see that these are the shortcodes that I'm using to populate that content, are you saying that you'd like to see the content that's contained within that shortcode on the fly, as it were? So once I'm in here, I don't have to go to another screen to see what the content is to come back and do that stuff. If that's what you mean, then yes, of course, certainly we'll look at that. And that's a great idea. Thank you.
Quick question from Bob. You can already do this, Bob. Will booking info ever load directly into show notes? If you go in and you've got your guest using the Captivate guest booking feature, and you've got your guest booking already in your dashboard, which looks like Gary's just bringing up now, you can add that guest and assign that guest to a specific episode, drop the guest booking shortcodes in there, and that will show all the guest booking information that the guest has shared, as long as it's supported currently on show notes. So for example, you wouldn't get a headshot in show notes because it wouldn't be supported on podcast apps. They don't really support rich media, but bio, website link, etc. would already be assigned and dropped in for you. So yeah, you can definitely do that already, Bob, and Gary's just showing you there.
Indeedy, yes. So in your episodes, you can go in and add, and yeah, as Danny said, any guests that you've got with an active booking, you can add that to your episode, and yeah, all good to go.
So yeah, I'm just going to answer this one from Tamara. We've got help articles. This is really just like an overview and sort of a deep dive secret where you can see exactly how you can use our existing features to save you time, which allows you to then market your show more, attract sponsors, that kind of stuff. But we do have a huge help article section over in Captivate, and Gary shared it earlier, I think, so which is help.captivate.fm. And so you've got walkthroughs, videos, all the cool stuff there. And our support team is always on hand 24/7. So if you have a question about any of the features within the Captivate dashboard, our team's there ready to help you. Well, okay. And we'll make sure that you're using this properly and there's no confusion there because we don't want that, obviously. But yeah, for sure, Tamara. Okay, so here's one from Aubrey. Can we use this feature in a hybrid way? such as I manually draft the show description, but then pull in the sign-off copy and social media links, which I think is what you do, or you showed earlier, Gary, with the hybrid episode planning.
Yeah. So Aubrey, you manually draft the show description, but then pull in the sign-off copy and social media. So yeah, that's kind of similar to what we were doing here. So if you wanted to, you could use a combination of static text and shortcodes. I think that's what you were getting at. It's probably the best example is to show in this block here for our weekly sign-off. You can see here that we've composed all of the content in terms of static text within this block, but we also use shortcodes interspersed with that. So yeah, you can totally do that. You can you can use a combination of those things. Yeah, for sure. Is that what you meant, Aubrey? Just make sure. But yeah, you can definitely do that.
Okay, and here's a question from David. It's pretty much the same as Tamara, I believe. But yeah, I mean, as mentioned, David, there is help articles already on the website. And we can always have like an office hours over on the Facebook group about some best practices that can, help you with that. Or we can even update the help articles, and we can get the team to update the help articles that shares how to use this one or why you do want to use this one, etc. So we can definitely get that updated for you, for sure.
There's also a couple of videos on our YouTube channel that our co-founder Mark popped up when we released the feature, and that runs through a few of these things at a basic level. So check those out as well. Yeah.
So this is a slightly different question, so I'll just give you a quick answer, Pascal. It's entirely up to you. You can bulk release at the same time. Just make sure your episodes have a slightly different release time or publish time on them, so they don't appear in wonky order on the podcast app. So make sure it's like 901, 902, 903, that kind of thing. But entirely up to you. But also remember that your listeners have a finite amount of time for listening to their podcasts that they're subscribed to or following. So if you do put out 10 or 20 at once, they might not want to listen to 10 or 20. They can go and listen afterwards, obviously, but it might be better just to test it and see, okay, if I release 3 or 4 at once, it gets a better uptake than releasing 8 or 9 at once, for example.
Yes. Yeah. Just while you're doing that, Danny, just a couple of follow-ups from Dr. Marianne Trent. I'd prefer to see shortcodes automatically paste in the text because I tend to copy and paste my show notes into YouTube. So I think just to clarify on that, because we had another comment similar to that earlier, and that is when you're going into adding a shortcode anywhere. In this example, I'm just in my publish your episode, but if I go to a shortcode and go to add one, you do get this modal that shows you the input type. So I can input this as dynamic text, or I can change that over to static and insert that, and that will just surface up the text that's inside that shortcode, and just have it as static text. So if you can still use shortcodes, you can still have all of that information there, and then when you add that to either your episode, etc., you can then choose to display that or insert it, should I say, as static text, and then you can copy all of that and use it in other places, etc. But you can do that kind of, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for picking that up there, Gary. And Adrian's just jumped in to answer Aubrey's question as well, which is awesome, which is why we love our podcasters as well, helping each other. But yeah, Adrian does this on his podcast. So they'll create an episode template with headings, leaving space to add a description and guest bio manually. And in that way, you can add more details, etc., as opposed to the details that the guest offers on the booking form. And then those sections with dynamic blocks and shortcodes works great. So definitely a hybrid option. And Adrian, thanks for jumping in there.
Very cool. Yes. And he also says we could solve the preview issue with preview episode notes. Have that as a button in the episode builder. Yeah, that's an option. Very cool. Thank you.
Alrighty, so I think I'm doing my Matthew McConaughey again. I only did the one alrighty this time. I was just checking there was no more questions there. All the stars are popped off. So yeah, this has been awesome. I hope everybody's can see the value of this, and that Gary did an awesome job, obviously. And I know, as I mentioned, I'm going to be doing a lot more stuff dynamically, especially as I seem to launch a new podcast every week. I know Mark was like, give me some grief about that the other day about having more podcasters than some podcast hosts even. But yeah, This will be a regular monthly webinar. So the next one will be in about a month's time, actually. It's every third Wednesday of the month, and we'll always update you through email, on our socials, etc. So we'll be looking at stuff that you can do with Amy that you might not be doing at the moment. For example, how you can really optimize your Captivate sites, how you can really make use of the Captivate Sync plugin for WordPress, which you may not be aware of at the moment. So there's a lot of features that will be gone over. And if you have any requests, if you like, just pop into our support chat and the little chat icon at the bottom right of your dashboard or Captivate site. And we can pick that up and, log that in for you. Now, as I did mention, just to close things off, if you're not a Captivate user at the moment, but you'd like to take a look and see all the cool features that we have released over the past 12 months and beyond, and all the awesome features that are coming out very soon that we'd love to talk about, but we can't. Mark's sworn us to secrecy upon pain of death by 15 swords, I believe the last threat was. I don't want to do that. But we've got a free trial with Captivate that normally is 7 days. If you sign up using the Live 30 promo code coming from the webinar, that trial will be extended from 7 days up to 30 days. So it'll really let you get to know the features, mess about with a test podcast, import up a podcast from an existing host and check it out, see what the features are like, and get to know our support team and ask questions that you might not know the answer to being a new Captivate user. So just use the Live 30 promo code upon signing up when you choose your plan, etc. And that'll be you'll get that 30-day free trial automatically. So again, Gary, I bow down to your awesomeness today. It was really cool. I think we should have you do all with them, actually. I'm going to put that to Mark. I'm sure you'll be okay with that.
Yeah, I love doing these. I love playing with the stuff that we build. It's fantastic to use it in everyday life as well as design and build it behind the scenes as well. So yeah, I love doing these things, and I'm sure you'll be fine, dude, when you come to do your next one, and which is in exactly a month's time, I think. So yeah, I look forward to your one, whichever one's coming.
Throwing peanuts on the gallery. So again, thanks for everybody for joining. I know you're taking time out your day to take part in this and join us and bring your awesome questions and help the others that are taking it, in the comments. So I appreciate that. And we will see you in a month's time. Until then, have a great rest of the week. Have a great upcoming weekend and keep podcasting.
Bye.
Take care.